have implemented SDMX within their enterprise. And that's not just, some guy sitting in IT who happens to manage an API endpoint for you. It's really your organization, sort of by large, using SDMX to meet their needs. So a lot of interest. I've been working on SDMX, getting it up to at the enterprise level in my institution for the past few years. So I'm really excited to hear all the lessons learned that you guys have had. So for our first presentation, we'll be starting with David. He's a smart data practices manager at the OECD, and he leads the SDMX modeling team that remodels the OECD's data metadata structures using SDMX. He's been involved in IT system development for 30 years, most of the time in official statistics. And he's also chair of the statistical working group, which maintains all of the content-oriented guidelines for SDMX implementation and statistical modeling. As a member of the Modern Stats Standards Working Group that maintains the statistical modernization models for business and technical architecture. So over to you, David.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Okay, so my presentation will be on this task force for implementing SDMX at the enterprise level. So the background to this task force is that where we have more and more agencies that really recognize the value of SDMX now because it's more and more mature, and they want to adopt SDMX. Now, when we adopt SDMX, it's never really for to create a silo or for like one domain or one team, or at least it should not be. It's almost always for multiple domains or across the whole agency or for several stages of the statistical life cycle. So we have this urgent need that we've really seen over the last year or two for resources to help with implementation and for best practices. Okay, so the expertise is growing because we have more and more experience in doing it, but this knowledge for implementation, it's really in several people's heads. Right. I mean, there may be some written guidelines or experiences, but they're not really widely recognized or distributed or agreed upon, across the SDMX community. And I think I could say that the experts, they probably don't all agree on the best practices. They may agree on quite a lot of them, but probably they haven't discussed all aspects and actually agreed on them. So what we have is, we have expertise, but we have no kind of reference strategy, no material for adopting SDMX at scale, especially across things like structural metadata, business processes related to SDMX. We have several things, for specific IT systems, but not the kind of business process or strategical level. So I said that there's this urgent and growing need for implementation. The knowledge is in people's heads, but there's no reference strategy. So what we have is, of course, we have an opportunity to actually do something and agree and deliver this strategy, this guideline.
We don't see your slides if you're clicking through.
Okay. They don't see my slides as I'm clicking through them. You can see the slide now. So sorry, I'm very sorry, but this is the previous slide. Hopefully you were all listening to me, right? Yeah. Thank you. So yeah. Anyway, here's a recap. So yeah, we have this SDMX adoption gap which is in yellow. So the left-hand side, we have the business case for SDMX. I mean, this is also being modernized, but we've had the business case for quite some time. We have this already. on the right-hand side, we have, how to implement SDMX technical and statistical certain use cases like the data modeling guidelines, right? This is like domain-based. We have the technical standards, of course, we've always had them, and we have many other guidelines. But what we don't have is the kind of yellow pillar here, which are things like, how to start adopting SDMX across an agency. What are the skills required for adopting SDMX? What are the kind of quality assurance indicators, the governance aspects, structural metadata, but shared structural metadata. So, modeling guidelines, it talks about, code lists and concepts, but they're for a certain domain. I don't think that we have anything on what a category scheme should look like, for an enterprise, or what an agency scheme should look like. What are the use cases? Why have it? What is the value? So, what we want to do is address this gap. So the proposal is to create a joint SDMX working group task force. The intended audience of this task force, of the output from this task force, is for experienced experts to agree on their recommendations and then use them as a reference, right? Also for SDMX implementers to be able to rapidly start the SDMX adoption, without so much reliance on these SDMX experts who, first of all, they've got to hunt for them before starting in a lot of cases. So, higher quality implementation and driving down the cost. And then for any other stakeholders involved in implementation, they just get knowledge on how they would be affected, what is their role. So the task force has already had a kick-off meeting. This happened last week, where we talked about the scope of the work. We talked about, the deliverables, what they could be, and of course, the working procedures and the timeline, etc. So the scope, this is our kind of beginning scope, is we could include, aspects of the institutional setting of an SDMX strategy. So, who should do what in implementation, and post-implementation, what processes could look like, etc. Also, cross-domain structural modeling recommendations. So this is the category schemes, agency schemes. How many concept schemes will be best practice? Should you have like one per DSD? Should you have like, one across the whole organization? Can you have multiple? Just things like that. And MSDs, of course, for reference metadata. How to share, reuse, and reuse concepts and code lists, and integrate, how to take your existing metadata, which may not be SDMX, and integrate the use of SDMX structural metadata, how to gradually kind of move into this SDMX world. Also, if your architecture is based on GSBPM, even GSIM, how to integrate that with the SDMX information model, how to start, so what does a pilot look like, best practices, some things like, if you make a prototype, then don't necessarily put that into production because this can really cause problems, as we've seen. And where to start in the life cycle. Many times people start with dissemination, so some pros and cons on where to start in the life cycle, basically, and how to transition from your legacy systems to SDMX. The working procedures and the timeline. There will be like a virtual meeting once per month, drafting in between. We need a chair. And secretariat. I mean, I've been the chair for the first meeting, probably the next one as well, as we just get going. But the preference would be like a national agency to actually, chair this, or a central bank. And the draft timeline is end of 2025 for the delivery of the guideline. So, yeah, just final slide. We're really, really interested in getting the feedback from this session. Okay, so any questions, any discussion, this is kind of, this will be gold for this task force, especially the breakout session that's going to happen later on. So please, get your thinking caps on, but most of all, tell us about your experience and what could have helped you overcome any of those challenges that you had. And the task force, we'd really like to call for additional experts in the task force. Okay, we're few at the moment. I don't think that we have any central bank people in the group. We're mainly statistical organisations, so please, as long as you have experience in implementing SDMX, you're willing to share it and you will actively participate, then please feel free to volunteer for the task force. Okay, it's really important that we have input from not only across the statistical community, but also from different regions as well, because different regions may have their own challenges. So yeah, that's it for my presentation. So I don't know if have we got any time for questions now, or maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. So anyway, thank you very much. So yeah, as I said, just put your thinking caps on for the rest of the session, and that's it. Thank you. Okay, so switching from me now, for the next presentation, I'd like to introduce Stefan Schipper from the Asian Development Bank. So Stefan will present on enhancing data management through the SDMX standard. Stefan is a senior statistician in the data division of the Asian Development Bank. His work includes managing ADB statistical database, producing knowledge products and capacity development in Asia and the Pacific, with a focus on open data and seasonal adjustment. Prior to joining ADB, Stefan was a statistician at Eurostat, senior economist statistician at the German Central Bank, and a lecturer on business mathematics and statistics at the University of Applied Sciences, Mainz in Germany. Stefan holds a doctoral and master's degree in business administration from the European University Viadrina, Germany. Please, Stefan, take it away.
Thanks a lot, David, for the introduction. Dear participants, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be here at the 12th SDMX expert meeting. I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this event, the SDMX sponsors, as well as to all the participants who took their time to be here to attend this event. It is my pleasure to present the Asian Development Bank's activities on enhancing data management through the SDMX standard. Can I move on with this one, this slide?
No, with your, are you plugged in?
Not yet.
You should be able to do that. Try to use the thing. Oh, but it's the
This one. Okay. Since 2018, the Asian Development Bank has set up his first technical assistance project to support its developing member economies in the Asia and the Pacific region in their efforts to implement this SDMX standard within the national statistical system. Our projects focus on producing high-quality statistical data using modern technologies and best practices, with a particular emphasis on enhancing capacity on SDMX in the Asia-Pacific region. Our support also included the development of e-learning courses, which we have developed jointly with other development partners to bridge the knowledge gap on SDMX. This year, we have released a report where we highlight the outcomes of our project. So the Asian Development Bank is releasing each August its annual statistical flagship publication, which is called Key Indicators. A flagship publication would mean that it's signed by our president. So this year we have released jointly with our flagship publication a special supplement on enhancing data management through the SDMX standard. The report illustrates how developing member economies can benefit from implementing SDMX for enhanced data management, data production, and data exchange. In addition to the advantages of implementing SDMX, the report highlights also ADB's role in the region and its support for its developing member economies in the adoption of SDMX. So the publication link is also available in the slide. If we look at some key production workflows the NSS are facing, so the data exchange and data dissemination is an integral part of each national statistical system. A national statistical system often involves multiple reporting organizations, each responsible for collecting a certain set of data. Often each organization has its own data collection methods and its own formats in producing these outputs. It can be in a spreadsheet or, for example, only in digital files. So the diversity of these data collection methods might also create resistance to standardize the practices, resulting then in complexities for consolidating the data sets by the national statistical system for dissemination. The lack of metadata harmonization may also require a lot of manual data handling and validation, which is time-consuming and often prone also to errors. Often manual work is also slow by nature and might then also impact the dissemination timeline. So if we look at the challenges national statistical offices are facing to ensuring data quality, this also includes like a resource limitation, the navigation of legal and ethical constraints, as well as adopting modern technologies. To overcome these challenges is crucial for producing high quality data for dissemination for an informed policy formulation. So SDMX has emerged as a means to streamline data activities. In the report we also show, I think you're all well aware of it, the key milestones of SDMX. The initiative started already in 2001. Then it was adopted by the UNSC in 2008 as a preferred standard for the statistical data and metadata exchange. In 2021, SDMX version 3.0 was launched, and 1 year later we have released, in collaboration with other development partners, the first learning course on SDMX Foundation, followed by the SDMX Tools course 1 year later. So to present some of our outcomes of our technical assistance project. First, we support our developing member economies in their efforts in adopting SDMX in the National Statistical System. In 2021, we have conducted a survey among the national statistical offices in our region, and based on their feedback, we have then started to develop e-learning courses to bridge the knowledge gap on SDMX. In the following slide, I summarize all the statistical offices we are supporting are being summarized. So we have supported the National Statistical Office of Thailand to produce a data portal. A data portal is not a simple repository of the data. It makes it easy for the users to retrieve the data, customize the data, visualize, make charts of the data, and also download the data in various formats. We have now supporting jointly with the Pacific Community, SBC, and UNSCAP, the Samoa Bureau of Statistics, in developing a data portal. The Fiji Bureau of Statistics has just joined this initiative, and we will support both Pacific Island countries together. We are also currently supporting the National Statistical Bureau of Bhutan in their efforts to enhance their data management for their social economic indicators. To come into a bit more detail, for the Thailand National Statistical Office, we have provided assistance with other development partners to the Thailand National Statistical Office, and the Thailand National Statistical Office has taken this initiative forward to establish a robust modern platform, a statistic sharing hub, which is maybe one of the most comprehensive data portals in the Asia-Pacific region, and it houses a diverse range of indicators that are available in Thailand within different agencies, includes the SDG indicator, social economic data, population data, and as it's a data portal, there are advanced features allowing users to easily search for the data they are looking for, customize their tables, download the data in various formats, and also have an SDMX API for machine-to-machine data transmission. In 2021, we have conducted a survey among our regional member economies. 31 out of our 49 regional member economies have responded, and we wanted to assess their level of awareness on SDMX and also to see their priorities and requirements they see for implementing SDMX. And the survey has then provided a comprehensive understanding on the level of interest among the national statistical region offices in the Asia-Pacific region, the areas they focus for SDMX implementation, where they see the benefits, but we also got an understanding of the challenges they are facing and moving ahead. So when we look at the benefits, the National Statistical Office see it's enhancing data and metadata management or dissemination for external users. So this underscores the priority given from the NSOs that their data is shared with the public and the stakeholders in a standardized, high-quality format and is easily accessible. This benefit was followed closely by improving data management as well as the standardization of statistical business processes. When we look at the challenges the national statistical offices have raised for implementing SDMX, there was first mentioned the lack of knowledge on SDMX as well as SDMX tools. And this is particularly interesting because this challenge was only mentioned by our developing member economies. In Asia and the Pacific, we have a quite diverse region from countries which may be not on the most advanced level, but also we have very advanced member economies. If we look, for example, at Singapore, Hong Kong, we have also Japan, New Zealand, Australia, so none of our developed member economies mentioned that they have issues on the lack of training or knowledge of tools for implementing SDMX. So the second challenge, what they mentioned, is getting subject matter statistician support as well as the lack of financial or human resources. So if we look at the survey, we see that there's a strong interest in the Asia-Pacific region on SDMX. The NSOs are aware of the benefits SDMX offers, but we also need to acknowledge that there is a lack of knowledge, especially in the developing countries, and this underscores the need for accessible and effective SDMX training programs to facilitate the adoption of SDMX. So given this feedback, we have then started to develop e-learning courses to bridge the knowledge gap. And we collaborated with UNSD and UNSCAP as well as the Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific to develop e-learning programs. So these e-learning courses are available on demand, free of charge. And we have developed two, first the SDMX Foundation course and then the SDMX Tools course. So the SDMX Foundation course, thanks for the feedback we have received from the SDMX Secretariat before we launched the course in 2022. Based on the feedback, we have then reopened the course so it's available for everyone interested to take this course. It's on demand, so whenever participants want to take it, they are free to do so. In total, we have certified over 600 learners, and the course is split into two models. The first model is targeted to managers. It gives an overview of SDMX and also highlights the benefits of SDMX. The second model provides then a more in-depth discussion on some key concepts like the SDMX information model, the content-oriented guidelines, and the overview of the IT tools. We have also asked in the evaluation in which tools the participants are interested in to learn more, and based on the feedback the participants have given, we have then developed the SDMX Tools course, where we have received very valuable feedback from the bank or from the BIS and ILO. We have launched the course end of 2023, and it was reopened mid this year. In total, over 70 learners have passed the course, and the target participants are statisticians and IT experts, as well as old staff from national statistical offices and from the national statistical system. So this course is again split into two models. The first model gives an overview of the various SDMX tools and also elaborates on their use cases, whereas the second model gives then an in-depth discussion on the three tools the participant ranked the highest, which are the SDMX constructor, Fusion Metadata Registry, and the SDMX converter. So if we look at the evaluation the participants have given, we have received a very positive feedback from the participants. The figures shown here are those who either ranked it as good or excellent. So the overall rating among all categories, like the topics were clearly explained, the presentation of the lecturer was all very positive, and participants also mentioned that the course is relevant for their work. So we have also conducted a webinar on enhancing data management through SDMX. We have done this under our Asian Development Bank Asian Impact Seminar series, where we discussed the advantages of adopting SDMX and highlighting also our role in promoting SDMX in the region. We had a panel discussion from the Thailand National Statistical Office, from the Pacific Community, as well as from SCAP, who shared their insight and the experience in implementing SDMX, and we had around 170 participants who engaged then also with the panel. So summarizing, we can see that there is a strong interest in adopting SDMX in the Asia-Pacific region. The NSOs are aware of the benefits that SDMX offers, but we also need to acknowledge the challenges they have voiced, such as the need for upskilling. So to address this need, online training courses are an effective strategy for upskilling, and also initiatives from the Asian Development Bank, other development partners, and the global SDMS community are closing the knowledge gap. I would like just to mention that the Asian Development Bank is setting up a new technical assistance project in next year, where we will select, or where we will be able to support selected developing member economies in Asia and the Pacific on adopting SDMX, and we are open to collaborate with other development partners as well as with NSOs interested in adopting SDMX. Thanks a lot for your attention. If you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Stefan, for the presentation. So we have 5 minutes for questions, if anyone would like to ask a question. So we have Luca down the front, so the microphone is coming, Luca.
Thank you, Stefan, for the presentation. First of all, before the question, actually 2 questions. I would like to thank the ADB for the work that they did on the online training modules, because we have used them as well and advertised them as well within our constituency in Europe, and they have been very much appreciated by our colleagues as well. So I think that they have been a benefit to the whole SDMX community beyond, let's say, the specific area that you are specializing in. I have 2 questions. One is, you mentioned in the last slide, you focused a lot on the on the issue of upskilling as being the main problem, as also shown by your survey. But you also mentioned that there's demand for open source tools, and I wonder if you could go a bit deeper in that, if there's a specific area where more open source tools are needed or requested. And the second question is more generic. Do you see anything that the SDMX sponsors or the governance bodies could do to better support your regional initiatives to spread SDMX further? Is there anything that could be done a bit better or more in certain areas by the sponsors, by the standard? That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Luca. I would also like to thank you for your review of the materials before we have released the online training courses. So thank you for this. And so I think like the materials, what we have only noticed that some of the documentation that is available is maybe for NSO when they want to start working on SDMX. It's a bit technical, so I think something like SDMX for newbies would be, I think, useful for someone who is interested in SDMX. So this is why we tried to bring this e-learning course, especially on SDMX Foundation, in a more non-technical way. So if someone is interested in getting started, so that they can easily start gaining their knowledge. Then you mentioned, I think, like the tools that are available. There are several tools. For example, when we developed the SDMX tools course, I think we listed down around 30 tools where we can look into. So maybe if NSO wants to start, this is also the feedback we got from the Thailand National Statistical Offices. They are trying different tools. Maybe some fit the same purpose, so they don't know. Do I use, for example, do I use ILO Smart or do I use the SDMX converter? So where are the benefits? So this is maybe not immediately visible to someone who is embarking on the journey, and there are many other use cases where there are several tools which are not immediately, maybe for someone who is well aware of the tools. He knows, okay, these are the benefits, this is a powerful tool. But so I think if there's something like easy guidance, which tool can be used for which purpose? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, just to say, well, there's now the new tools page, right, on sdmx.org. So, yeah, which is far better than the old tools page. So please, have a look at that, which is, I guess, one response to this kind of gap that was there before. So, sorry, just in the interest of time, Stefan, would you mind just answering the second question on, I think, what the SDMX sponsors could perhaps do to address these? And then we've got to move to the next presentation. So.
Yeah.
I thought you had answered it a bit, but...
sorry.
Okay. I tried.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I missed it. So, yeah, I mean, the time is now 2:15, so it's time to move to the next presentation. There's a Q&A session at the end of all the presentations. So please, if you've got any more questions, if you could save them for this kind of chunk at the end of the session. But, yeah, in the interest of time, we've got to move forward. So thanks a lot, Stefan. So, yeah, please...
Okay, so our next presenter will be Kamal. He's a consultant at the African Development Bank Statistical Department. He's been contributing to the advancement of the SDMX standards across Africa under the African Information Highway Initiative. As part of this team, he's conducted workshops and country missions in collaboration with sub-regional organizations, providing technical support for both member countries and regional bodies in Africa. In addition, he is assisting in integrating SDMX into data systems and implementing compatible tools and architectures.
Okay, thank you and good afternoon. So I will let you to travel from Asia to Africa, since I'm working with the African Development Bank, and you know the difference between ADB and FDB is just the F, the small f. Okay, so before starting the presentation, I would like to appreciate the morning session about the use of AI. But unfortunately, we can't use AI and query data doesn't exist. That's why we have to work on data and to model data and how to move from files, from databases, to a concrete, let's say, native system. This is more or less the main aim of my presentation. So I will go through, let's say, the need in Africa, especially in countries, sub-international organization, but also the main area of our support. And I will try to share with you some challenge that we face it, the solution that we adopted, and maybe we can learn from you with some advices. So, in Africa, we launched, let's say, since more than 12 years, an initiative or a program called Africa Affirmation Highway, which aims to modernize data, moving from CD, maybe some static web pages, to a dynamic web data portals, to allow users to use and reuse in an open format data and to be accessible. And this is covering 54 countries, mainly in statistical office. And also more than, let's say, about 16 what you call sub-regional organizations. In Africa, we have, for example, North countries, West countries, IMWA, COMESA, SADC, ESC. So there is some group of countries formed in what you call a sub-international organization. All of them, they are calling a support from African Development Bank. So, in terms of needs, if you can see from countryside, so we have, by the end, statistical office, they product data to be used, to be accessible, to be reused, and to be understood. But the problem, still there is a big gap between data producer and the data dissemination. And in the middle, sometimes, or maybe often, there is no data management system. And they are facing the problem of data collection, they are receiving a lot of requests, a questionnaire, etc., etc. But a lot of initiatives were done in Africa, in other countries, and they have a problem of ownership of tools or how to sustain this kind of knowledge. From sub-regional organizations, they have the same problem because they are collecting data, but also they are disseminating data. But they are facing problems, or they are challenging how to collect data in automated way, with a good quality, etc., etc. So I think all of these kind of requests or needs that are coming for all of us. That's why here in our context in African Development Bank, we are covering three main areas. One is capacity building. How to share knowledge, but not only to share, how to sustain, and how to simplify, and to be sure that this kind of knowledge will be used and will be maintained in the country. So for example, if we can make an assessment in African countries, most of them, they participate to several SDMX workshops, training, but finally, they are facing challenge to start or to concretize a native SDMX system. In terms of tools, this is the way to do it. It's not the main goal, but this is the way to do it. And here I will talk about what we did to simplify the way and to allow countries to own the tools and to be able to disseminate, manage, report, share data in SDMX format. And all of this not can be done only by IFDB. We rely on what we call a partnership, and I will explain later. So when we started by group countries or clustering countries by, let's say, the level of advance, the level, if they know or not, if they have a system, if they have, for example, some countries that are suffering, they don't have even servers to work on it. So, and you come to talk about SDMX. Doesn't make sense for them. And also, we have a new stakeholders because we used to work with NSOs, but recently we are receiving requests from central banks. They want to move, especially if we are working with partnership with IMF. If they want to implement GDDS, SDDS, SDS Plus, etc., doesn't involve only NSO, but central bank, Ministry of Economy or Finance, etc., etc. For technical assistance, even before the COVID, we tried to have the hybrid approach, remote session, physical session, workshops, etc., etc. And now we have some pilot countries because we are trying to cover all countries, but we put in place what you call an annual work plan with countries that we agree with all the steps, concept note, very clear. We have very clear milestones, etc., that we agreed together with countries. And the idea is how to sustain. And I underline this point, how to sustain, because, and you will see during the challenge, you can train people, and then people, they will leave, or they will change the direction, and there is no continuity. In terms of capacity building, let's say we are playing the role how to, I don't know if it is the right word, how to translate or how to demystify SDMX to African countries. Doesn't mean you are not smart, but is how to concretize. Because if you go to sdmx.org documentation, very good documentation, but I don't know, they are facing some challenge to understand and to implement it to a concrete example. And I like the idea to have this kind of guideline, how to start a project in SDMX. That's why also we have our main focus is on data modeling. Because tools, you can just one day you can learn how to use the tools. You can go with any tools, doesn't matter. But the problem, how you model your data in a good way. And next step is is just for training, but how to streamline this kind of process of data modeling, because you not model this data just for training, or because if you have monthly data, each month you receive a new update. Maybe you didn't align your structure, your codes with data production unit codes, and then you have to transform. So I will not go in details, but just it is very important to streamline. That's why you have to sustain. So this is just a quick overview about how to say capacity building workshop that we conducted. So during the last 4 years or 3 years, and even before, we conducted some what you call a sub-regional workshops or some regional workshops. The difference is sub-regional workshops when we cover just a part of the continent, like 10, 15 countries. Regional workshops is more or less we cover the entire continent. And the next year we are planning to conduct what you call country missions, to stay at least 1 or 2 weeks working on data modeling with about 10 or maybe 10, 15, depends of 10 pilot countries. And we are planning to have at least two regional workshops, one for a French-speaking country and one for English-speaking countries. We rely a lot on partnership. That's why I want to thank all our partners, and here is an open call to any other institution that want to join us to work together in Africa, because we can do all this kind of big job alone. That's why I want to thank all institutions. We conducted several workshops, capacity building, and now we are trying to resolve the issue of in Africa, maybe in other continents, that countries they have 3, 4, even sometimes 4 data portals or tools, because each tool is linked to a project or a fund. Now, like IMF, we have also FAO, UNICEF, etc., say they don't give them the country money to say, okay, you can develop a new tools. No. You can rely on open data portal, and now I will show you later the new portal that we are developing to work, and which will cover any other any use cases that you want. In terms of tools, and as I said, we developed these tools, which is the result of more than 10 years working, or feedbacks, and remarks, and benchmarking to arrive to this step. And this is my, how to say, my belief. Tools itself is not the main goal, because this is a way to do the job. Because by the end, what we are doing SDMX is data that will be available to be consumed, to be understood, and to be reused. That's why we try to first have a tool that will be adapted to the context. Low resource in terms of human resource, personal resource, technical resource is very important. And also it's open source, free, doesn't require to buy any license, and you can even install in your laptop. It's very important. In terms of view, we try to also another point that we want to reduce the gap between data producer and data dissemination. That's why we added this processing here, because the tools, we merged two systems in one system. In the bank, our colleague statisticians, they have what you call a DCS. It's a World Bank tools used to aggregate, to make calculation aggregation. And since in the bank we are sharing the same tool as the countries, we integrated this kind of module. Is called processing. So we know that we have dissemination and reporting, but also we added processing. In terms of technology stack, we try to reuse open source eStat framework. And the top, we added new functionality to, let's say, to facilitate. I would not to hide complexity. I know that some people, they don't like this word, to hide SDMX complexity. Let's say, to facilitate the work, how to use SDMX. And for this, we try to keep as much as possible the user experience. In terms of functionalities, we try to implement, in terms of data entry, in addition to, let's say, the classical format that the current tools use, like CSV, SDMX, ML, etc., is the possibility to load data in Excel file. And then I will explain the functionality or module that we have created, which is called easy loading. And also we added other functionalities, and that I will explain later, is the data movement. Because for the use case of the bank or data collector, even for statistical office, they have the need to move data in SDMX formats, data and structure, maybe, and they are planning to build what we call a data backbone in a national level. These tools will be offered for free, not for NSO, but also for other ministries, or let's say any stakeholders in national system. Then tomorrow, NSOs can collect or pull data from Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, if they are able to manage and model the data in SDMX format. As I said, for processing, so we can, in the same system, you load data there, and you can make calculation and create or derivate other indicators or other time series, and then you can disseminate your data through the system. So this is one of the main functionality that we added. Currently, we have what you call Open Data Portal, ODP. This is the abbreviation ODP 1.0. People, they create an Excel file with Excel sheet to describe the structure. And they have other Excel sheet when they put like code list and other for data. So we try to keep the same user experience. That's why here with easy loading, we have a possibility to specify the ID of the cube, where this cube will be attached in the category scheme. You have the structure, and within the structure, we try to simplify to put like dim for dimensions. Instead of attribute, you can put flag, footnotes to explain this attribute is linked to dataset level or observation level, etc. And here you can see the Excel code list for Excel sheet. And we can also add data. And as you can see here, in addition to the format, when you have a column for ops value and a column for the time period, we have the possibility to load data and the timeline in horizontal format. It's very, very important, especially many countries, they have data like that. So to transform, it will take time. So that's why we allow them to load data as it is. Now, within the Excel file, you can also specify the list of data flow with the ID and the query within the Excel file. And then the system, when you load, will load, create structure, create everything, and also create data flows based on this query, just you have to publish in a data browser. And another thing here is very important, is to make the mapping. Because countries, they are receiving a lot of requests. So you have the possibility to create an Excel sheet. When you can specify which DSD that you want to map with. So in this case, this DSD should be loaded before. After that, you make your transcoding here, your mapping and transcoding. And when you load, data will be loaded, your mapping will be loaded, and also data flow based on this mapping will be created. You have just to publish it. So this is just to simplify the way to work. But you can also create all artifacts based with traditional way. Another functionality that we implemented also is a pull requester. So the idea here is to simplify data movement and structure from a node to another or from an environment to another for endpoints. But not only SDMX endpoint based on Eurostat NSI web services, but also we are developing some plugin to be able to load data from ECB, BIS, IMF, so fusion-resistant technologies, other World Bank, NSI, SDMX endpoint, and let's say most of the used plugin or SDMX endpoints to be able to load it. For the time being, we can load, and you can load, so you can create your job. You specify from where you get, so you add data provider, just to have the path of your endpoint, you load, and then you can schedule your job to be run by night. To go quickly here in terms of functionality for statisticians, so you have some formula, and this formula you can go and make selection and make calculation. For example, if you have a cube one, you have the GDP and you have number of population you want to calculate, you can do it. If you, for example, you have a trade with hashes, for example, 8 or 6, and you want to aggregate, you can do it also. This job also can be scheduled and can be run by night, or it depends, okay? In terms of data exploration, in addition to, let's say, now we can say it is a classical way, yeah? Because when you see chatbots, such a very advanced way. But now we are developing a mobile application. It will be Android, iOS, which will be able to connect to SDMX endpoints. This is very important because, and this will be also, it is a generic application, will be shared among all African countries, institutions, and also in the future will be also available in GitHub for free for an open source. Coming now to, let's say, the challenge that we faced. So here, the problem, when we start SDMX, and this is, I came from National Statistic Office. Yeah, I worked more than 15 years in ENS Tunisia, and then I moved in a regional level to work with IFDB and COMISA, and I know more or less the both sides. Sometimes the project, when they started, failed because this project launched by one person or two or a small team in the institution. And this small team, when they have to move to ask other colleagues to get the data, they say, no, you participate to the workshop, you didn't invite us. No, this is the reality. Huh? That's why we find a solution when we start in the back. The project should be initiated by the high-level management. Otherwise, it's not a project. Then we receive a letter, at least a mail from the DG to say, okay, we request a support for the country for this and this and this. And then we have a meeting with him the first day, and we have to assign people, etc., and make the follow-up. To be sure, at least to guarantee all of the NSO that are aware about the project, because you can work with a close team, and people just next the door next, they are not aware about the project. And when they move or they change, the project will fail. The problem of data at itself, I think this is a common project. The problem, I think 90% of the time is not how to model data, etc., is how to clean data, how to prepare data. Data is fragmented. Sometimes when you work with dissemination team, they have a small part of the data, and then you discover that data production, they have more dimensions, and you made the data modeling, etc. Here, in terms of limited, let's say, limited IT infrastructure, I think this problem is not a big problem, you see, because technical, let's say, skills, etc., we are trying to give them, like, as I said, a free open source, and when I said free, they don't have to pay anything, they don't have to buy license, and they can do it, and they can install it even in a laptop. And it's very important. You know why? Because if someone is interested, for the time being, they don't have a server, and they want to start. If they have to buy a server, that means you kill the project from the beginning. For the time being, we offer what you call a cloud version for countries, but also we support countries to install in their server if they have any server. Yes, another point is very important. When we start a project, it's very important. Sometimes we saw some countries, they jump directly to data modeling, but by experience, we have to conduct a data inventory. It's very important to know what they have as a data. Even sometimes the department or people that are working with, they don't know about what they have as a data, because some data is only in the laptop or dissertation, doesn't exist even in the server. So it's very important to start with the primary step to understand the data landscape. I think I covered most of the points. This is a summary, it's not an exhaustive list of challenges that we may face. We tried to find a solution for that. So the way forward, we are planning to move the entire continent in SDMX format. So as I said, we are working now next 2 weeks. I think next week we will be involved in other countries like Senegal. Many countries that are requesting us to go and work. We have our colleagues here from Cameroon. Just during the break, they asked me when you come to us, etc., etc. So we are going to work in data modeling. We are trying to find a kind of hub, because we have a sub-regional organization. They have, not all of them, but they have some experts, is to train a trainer to help us. But it is an open call to collaborate, because, as I said, we are covering 54 countries. If you have one institution, but now we have central bank, some ministries, so we expect to have more than 100, let's say, institutions to cover. So that's all from my side, and thank you.
Okay, maybe we have time for just one question, if anyone has a question.
Thank you, Kamal, for the excellent work. I know how much you've invested personally also in this work, and go around countries supporting them, and it's great to see. This question of simplicity and hiding SDMX is always coming up. It's always, I think, it's a conversation we've had a few times. It always seems to be this sort of something there we want to get to, but we can never get there. And I'm wondering whether we ever will, really. And also it sort of goes back to a question, which is, are we trying to get away from the fact that you can't get away? Someone has to actually understand and do the data modeling, and understand those concepts. So what you're presenting here is, I assume, is like an entry level. But then how do you take that, and how do you take those people that you're, onboarding an entry level to the next level to become competent data modelers and be the next trainers, approach?
Thank you. Because I know I have only 20 minutes or 25 minutes. Yes. Just an example is not, I will not respond, maybe it's just a part of your question. When we conduct a workshop or training, let's say a workshop training with SDMX for 5 days, till the third day, we'll not talk about SDMX. I will surprise you. Data modeling. Doesn't matter, because for them, they are doing data modeling without knowing that they are doing data modeling. After that, we map with with their knowledge with SDMX to say, for example, yes, this is called code list. This is called dimensions. So just with tables, I thought how to identify concepts, which can be dimension, attribute, etc. How can we combine, slice? What is the advantage, disadvantage, etc., etc. And then they are no, oh, really? This is that I use it to think and directly SDMX without knowing I'm the SDMX. Then we will use what you call the terminology of SDMX. Now, after that, we share with them SDMX information model to go through to explain DSD, data flow, etc., category scheme. So, for example, to say, when you want to categorize your data, group data, you have what you call a tree, right? We have topics, subtopics. This can be done by category scheme. Oh, okay, now I got it. But we use it to have classical way for SDMX training, start SDMX information model, oriented guideline, IT, etc. By the end, even in practical exercise, they are lost. When they arrive to create a DSD, they said, okay, I'm lost. That's why we reverse the way to do it. And we try to start from their data, choose any data and start working to understand the structure, and then they differentiate the rules. And after that, we say, okay, listen, this, and you give some example, like when you build a house, you need a blueprint. And then you can put your, I don't know, just an example. Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, so, sorry, Kamal, we got to cut it a bit in the interest of time, but yeah, I fully agree on your great comments on structural modelling. Yeah, it's really good to invest time on getting that correct and the best practices. So thank you. So for our next presenter, the presentation is on the use of SDMX in a multi-standards environment as a base to build transversal platforms. So here is Juan Munoz from INEGI. Juan has a PhD in computer science. He is the Director of Informatics Planning and Normativity at INEGI, overseeing IT governance, digital strategies, and integration of new technologies. He is a professor and researcher at the Autonomous University of Aguascalientes. Also a SDMX collaborator since 2004 in many SDMX groups. He was the chair of the SDMX TWG and also the SDMX for SDGs and the cross group on microdata. He's in that group. Also the UNEC Standard Support Group and Blue Skies Thinking Network member, working on things like GSPPM, GSIM, GAMSO, and a board member in the UNSD Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics. So please, Juan, if you could start, you have about 22 minutes now, including Q&A, so it's up to you how much you give for Q&A. But yeah, 5 minutes past 2, we've got to stop for coffee.
Of course.
5 minutes past 3, sorry.
I don't need so much pressure on me, but let's start. Well, we are going to talk about how we can use SDMX, but not taking this is not the only standard that we can use. And certainly, if we intend to build platforms that will be enterprise-wide architecture, we need to complement it with other standards. Okay, that's fine. Well, to start, we need to understand that if we build a platform, an IT platform, is because we want to provide a set of technologies is structured in such a way they operate and interact with each other, and we are talking about hardware and software, in a way that is harmonized and is integrated. if we talk about a transversal IT platform, we are taking these kind of platforms to cover an enterprise-wide vision. And if we are talking about these platforms for statistical purposes, for official statistical purpose, we need to think about the whole process, the whole statistical process, as it is defined by GSBPM as a life cycle. Well, to go there, we need to start thinking in that we have a cultural problem in our organization. Is the way we think about the statistical projects. We go from down to top, in a bottom-up point of view. The conceptualization of the statistical process are almost always seen from the point of view of who manage the project, and that they need to have the control over all the project. And this is common. And this brings us to have, as a departure way, silos of information. It doesn't matter if we have IT trying to harmonize all these things. If the conceptualization of all the information comes from different points of view, we will not have harmonized that. Let's start from that. So we need to have architectures which are platforms that will provide the common infrastructure, the common technology. But let's see about what happened and what we need about an architecture. Okay. The reasons to build transversal platforms are many. We have some of them here. You can read it. I don't want to spend too much time, but we have many reasons to think about, okay, having transversal platform will speed up the way we work and will provide us flexibility, more security in the whole environment of IT. Of course, you can review it in detail after when we share the presentation. And we are not going to put nervous the chairs. So to have this kind of architecture, we need two elements to have a transversal platform, One of them is a governance framework which comes from the high level of the organization, because we are not going to manage each project separately. We need to have common agreements. So we need a governance framework to provide direction and to promote the changes that we need in the way we work. And we need the blueprints. We need an architecture to align the efforts. We have, this is something that we are not alone on this. We have several tools to go with this. Of course, in the highest level of the architecture, we can have TOGAF or SACMAN or any other. In the governance framework, we have DAFI, and also the SDMX governance pattern that is a good way to think about the governance, something that can help us to think about. But a governance framework has some elements that are needed. We need an organization, so we can go, okay, as I said, with the picture that can provide us the reference, that can provide us the SDMX governance models, and also we have frameworks like the General Activity Model for Statistical Offices, the GAMSO, which can help us to recognize the activities. Then to model the process, we have GSBPMs and some international agreed methodologies for the different process on statistics, and principles like FAIR, like the ones that are described on the DAFI and that governance framework for interoperability, and some guidelines like the ones that we have in the modernization maturity model or the handbook of management of organization of national statistical systems. So we have a lot of tools that we can put in a concrete way to establish a governance framework, but we need to put them in a coherent environment. I talk about the SDMX governance bodies. The pattern that they follow is very interesting. Maybe you have noticed that it used to be that all these kind of efforts were related just to IT. But SDMX showed us that in any of these projects, we have two sides, the conceptual and the technical. And with the bodies that we have on SDMX, we have the secretariat, which is in charge of the management, and we have the sponsors committee, which is in charge of the governance of the standard. So this is a very easy to follow pattern that we have for the governance. And we already have it such a very long time ago. And, well, something that we need to remember that SDMX started with the cross-domain concepts, with the cross-domain code list, and of course the glossary, which can help us to harmonize in an international, not just for one organization, but for all the sponsor organizations with a common language, common data list. And then we have the global artifacts that help us to have one specific structure, one specific kind of work to report. And I will not say for one specific domain, but yes, for one specific project that is related to many international organizations. And if we need more, okay, we can extend the model and go for national requirements and so on. So we have a kind of rank of concepts which goes from general to particular needs. And this is something that is needed, really needed, to harmonize the information. We already have it. And, well, I talk about the TOGAF architecture. This is how we are organizing it at INEGI, how we conceptualize transversal platforms. We don't think about separate infrastructure for each project. We try to think in a common data platform for all the domains. And we are trying to develop systems that are reusable for the whole statistical process, not for one special use, not for one special user. No. Talking about a transversal platform is talking about in an enterprise-wide, and in the statistical offices, we have many domains. We don't have only one domain. We have many domains, and if we think about it, we cannot think on economics separate from socio-demographic platforms. We need one for all of them. And this brings us to a statistical interoperability that we have on the DAFI. And when we think about interoperability, almost always we think the interoperability that we can get from the IT tools. This is not enough. We can connect different bags or different sets of pieces that doesn't talk to each other, which are not interoperable in the statistical sense, because we don't agree in the same semantic. And I already talked about, we have some artifacts on SDMX that can help us to agree on these concepts, to agree in the way we represent the information. And this is the very basis. And this is not an IT. This is not from IT. It's the conceptual side. The conceptual side, which is where we start, is the starting point to get a statistical interoperability. Then we can define the structures, the structure that we have on the MSDs and DSDs, and okay, we have that. And we have formats on the SDMX. And we have API specifications to have the full statistical interoperability. But we need these four facets. We cannot have real statistical interoperability if we don't have any of these aspects. And having this in mind, when we have a data architecture integrating information, these pieces are basic. If you want to implement a data lake, you will need that. If you want to implement a real data warehouse, you will need that kind of structures. If you want to have real AI implemented structure, or as Gartner said, data I ready, we need this. We need the data glossaries, and for this we have the concept schemes, the SDMX glossaries, the cross-domain code list, and the category schemes to categorize and to conform the data glossaries. Then we have the mapping patterns that we are already using all the time when we build data flows. We can have structures which separate the information that we need to prepare different views. Yep. And all of this is something that can help us to have mechanism of data virtualization. We must recognize that SDMX have a very rich glossary, but it doesn't cover all the terms. DDI has worked a lot of it, on it, so we can help the people, the conceptual people, to select some concepts that they need to follow the whole life cycle with the DDI concepts, but the structures are there. And we have talked a lot the FAIR principles, and SDMX have the basis to implement this. We can establish findable information, accessible, interoperable, and reusable information, because we have all this structure that can help us to locate it. And if not, well, just review a concept scheme, which has the basis on this interoperability. And if we want to connect diverse domains, we always will be thinking on three aspects that are needed on this. The connection points are the conceptual definitions with the representations, geographical references, and periods of time. All these elements are in SDMX. And we have, as I said, other standards that can help us to work on this. GSIM can help to make abstract information objects that can be reusable on different domains. We can think about this, about dynamic elements which can be reused on different parts. Just as an example, we always think on a DSD or MSD as an instrument to collect information. Yeah? Because international organization will be integrating the reports from different organizations. But if we talk about collection instruments in a survey, just think about a DSD. It can help us to build reusable tools to collect information. And we have the constraints, and we can translate this kind of process that is already working on international organization to the national statistical offices. And this is just an example of how the information model can go. So, just to finish, well, I would like to have SDMX to solve all our problems, but it doesn't. We need SDMX complemented with the other standards, and we need to work more on aspects that are needed for a full integration of the transversal interoperable platforms. The management of microdata, which is not fully covered right now. We have some gaps. The multidimensional cube model is efficient, but if we want to talk about a transversal platform, we need to talk about many related structures that must be connected. And a snowflake is not enough. The REST API is useful. These specifications are useful for the common queries that we have. But when we are talking about volumes of information, we need more types of way APIs defined. And finally, the actual documentation that we have on the content-oriented guidelines. And don't get me wrong, but they are biased because they go from specific structures to cover projects, but we don't, almost always don't not cover the richness of a higher level, the concept schemes that can help us to harmonize all the concepts, and then going from a common set of concepts for the whole domain, we can go to build the DSDs. And if we see the projects that we already have, we have multiple definitions of the same concept for different projects. So we need to go up if we want to cover the whole enterprise architecture. And that's all. I tried not to put you so nervous, excuse me, but...
Yes, so thanks a lot, Juan. So a round of applause for... Yeah, so I'm sorry, but we're out of time for questions. But please, we're very interested in the questions, but they'll have to go to the end session, okay, like after all of the presentations and after the breakout session. So please keep your questions for that time, okay, because I have some questions as well.
Of course.
Okay, so I think it's time for coffee. Is that right, Luca?
That is correct.
Okay, so yeah, please, coffee is downstairs, yeah? Okay, and if you could come back for 3:30. Okay.
Okay, we're going to go on and get started. So our first presenter after the break is Alessio. He has 25 minutes to present, same as everyone else. So Alessio is an engineer in electronics working since 1999 for ISTAT as an expert in information technologies applied to the web dissemination of statistical data. In the last 20 years, he has been coordinating design and implementation of corporate web architectures for the dissemination and machine-to-machine exchange of statistical data through the application of international standards, particularly SDMX. In this field of activity, he has been collaborating with international institutions and organizations such as Eurostat and OECD, and technological innovation projects and task forces. So please get started.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Now I'm going to speak about the ISTAT experience in implementing SDMX strategy. I have some issue in the green. No. Okay. In this presentation, I will speak about, make an introduction about the modernization programs in ISTAT that have been the main reason about the idea of implementation of SDMX in our organization. Then about the implementation strategy, we speak about the main use cases that we have applied, the SDMX enablers, and also about the software solution that we have developed and implemented in ISTAT, and the architecture that we have applied. And finally, a conclusion related to future perspective and lesson learned in implementing SDMX strategy. Starting from 2010, in ISTAT we put in place several modernization programs. 2010, 16, 19, and also the last one started this year with the specific aims that were related to increase of quality in production, but also dissemination and exchange of statistical data, and cost reduction, particularly through the application of the concept of the reuse, that is a key word in using SDMX. Also a keyword for standardization of methodology, meta-information, and also software solution, and sustainable solution in the long terms, with the idea to make an investment that will be durable during the time. How we came to apply SDMX? Because we made an accurate trial phase that convinced the top management to consider SDMX as the main driver for the modernization in our institute. The main use case, we implemented a wide SDMX strategy that involved the use case that you can see here, starting from data reporting. I know that I'm not original in saying this, but data reporting has been the first driver of the base of the using SDMX, starting from the Eurostat data collection to other important projects as SDDS Plus for AMF. Then data dissemination, in which we passed from legacy data warehouses and dissemination system to a complete SDMX compliant system, that is our data warehouse in production, that is ISTAT data. The activities for improving quality in national statistical systems, we have a project called Hub of Public Statistics, about we will speak later, for the centralized dissemination of data coming from national organizations, statistical organizations, and last but not least, the support to other countries in implementing SDMX solution through cooperation projects, twinning projects, and grants by European Union. And what are the enables of the SDMX strategy? First of all, the re-engineering of statistical processes, and it was an aim from the top, started from the top management in order to reorganize the projects, the processes, and then the compliance with the European regulation and agreement with an international and national organization, specifically for data reporting, but also as we consider a recent case about, for instance, the high-value data set that are based on the application of a European directive. And in terms of IT, the possibility to move from legacy system, for instance, in the field of dissemination, to a plug-and-play architecture, and not only plug-and-play, but also service service-oriented architecture and able to implement the semantic interoperability. That means the possibility to make available data and metadata without the loss of meaning among different organizations. And okay, the IT solution that we developed and implemented to support the strategy has been our SDMX ISTAT toolkit that is used for supporting all the aspects of the strategy that I have previously exposed. And is a toolkit that is business-driven and SDMX-based, with the possibility to manage structural metadata, to model data and manage them inside a completely SDMX-compliant database, to manage and edit reference metadata and DCAT catalogs. The possibility to install and use in a very simple way the system with a plug-and-play mechanism in which there is an installation wizard, but the possibility for users at various levels to use the system, and also the possibility to plug some specific functionalities through a very simple mechanism in which it's possible to put inside the specific plugin for data transformation inside the system. It's flexible and scalable because it supports a standalone architecture, but also a multi-source architecture and various architectural configuration as the hub architecture. And as far as concerns the performance, we have particularly paid attention to the possibility to manage a very big data set of various millions of records, and we implemented, for instance, for our front-end tool, the data browser, a very performant cache system. This is a brief history about our implementation that started from the far 2006 with the SODI project that has been substantially the first or one of the first project in implementing an SDMX platform for data exchange at European level. Then from 2009 to 2016, we have consolidated, starting from the Eurostat tool, the SDMX reference infrastructure, to the implementation of first prototype of our application, the reporting platform. And then from 2016 through 2022, we have developed our real system, that is the SDMX ISTAT toolkit, starting from the application of it to the hub of public statistics for national statistical system, up to data warehouse and thematic systems in our data dissemination. In SDMX, we have various types of data reporting. The classic data reporting for the data transmission to Eurostat in SDMX format by using the DAMIS platform, and it is the push method. But also the possibility to the implementation of infrastructure for making available through SDMX web service data for Census Hub, and also for SDDS Plus and high-value dataset by exposing in all these cases an SDMX web service. And about the National Statistical System, we have implemented, as you can see below, a multi-source architecture in which the various organizations can manage independently data and metadata that are centralized, browsed by using our front-end application that can also be configured for be used to browse many different SDMX web services as a dispatcher, so selecting the data source, but also in a real hub configuration in which we can have only one category scheme and the data flows coming from various, in real time, from various data sources. And this obviously increment the possibility of the semantic interoperability, made an increase of quality of the IT system and also of the methods to make available the data from national organization participating to this project. And as far as concern our data warehouse, as you can see, we have a very big amount of data to be disseminated in a performant way. Corporate data warehouse has 2 billion data points with 450 data cubes. And we have more or less 3,000 data flows. These are very big numbers, and you have to consider that we can have also data set with more than 100 million data points that must be disseminated, for instance, as only one data flow by using specific facilities in browsing them and the use of the cache system in order, that is a double-level cache system, server-side and client-side, in order to get the possibility to make inside this big data set the selection that you need for with the specific filters substantially. And okay, as far as concern the support to other countries in implementing an SDMX strategies, in our project we made some training activities and training on the job for helping organization to transform data from format like Excel to data that can be stored inside databases with the important aspect to code the data instead to using only description. The implementation of repositories in which not store redundant data, but reuse the data for various purposes. For instance, data reporting to different organizations according to different data structure, substantially different DSD, through the use of an appropriate SDMX mapping that can be performed through our tools and also before us through Eurostat tools. and build the capabilities from on how to use the data by applying the standard. This is a step-by-step process that obviously needs appropriate time. But all of these organizations asked us only one thing: to get practical result in a very short time frame in order to obtain the results that could be effective for their processes, as for instance dissemination or data reporting. As far as concern our specific perspective, also in ISTAT we are thinking about to implement the instruments for artificial intelligence, specifically for data discovery and data searching in a natural language from the users. In this moment, we are in a phase in which we are making a benchmark among solutions proposed by ad hoc solutions proposed by different companies through specific proof of concept. Obviously, in this solution, there are commercial engines that are applied in order to satisfy our requirements. And we started from June 2024. More or less, the pilot will be finished. The pilot phase will be finished at the end of October. Then we will pass, starting from January to July, to the real implementation of the solution. What are the lessons learned that we have experimented in applying our SDMX strategy? There are a set of complexities that must to be considered. Specifically, one of the most, how to say, the most difficult is related to the selection of the IT solution. How to do, make or build, we can say. This is, there is not a univocal response to this question. It depends of the requirements that an organization has, the capabilities, and the substantially the scope that we would like to reach, in what time we want to reach. Furthermore, in our case, we choose to build by ourselves an instrument because we discovered that for implemented completely our strategy, this was the best solution for us. But for other organizations, maybe the solution is take a software coming from a vendor or from another organization. Our solution has been based on an initial big investment. So, need a very big budget initially in order to implement the strategy. Then it's necessary to priorities identification, because the resources are not infinitive, and then it's necessary to make some choices, what develop before, what publish before. And capabilities, build appropriate capabilities because, and this is not easy, because it's necessary to make an appropriate selection and to check if in the organization there is the appropriate set of capabilities, and obviously the consideration of the changes in the data life cycle according to the business requirement. Okay, I've finished. I apologize if I continued more.
That's okay. Just 1 minute. You went over. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alessio. Thank you. So yes, again, we'll have to take questions, at the end of the session. So please, keep your questions for that time. So we go straight into the next presentation. So Matthias Jug, sorry, Matthias.
No problem.
He will present on the role of data and metadata standards in data strategy. SDMX is a key enabler for data-centric approach and fair data statistics Netherlands. So Matthias Jug is strategic advisor for data management at Statistics Netherlands. He completed a MSc in computer science at the University of, I don't know how to say that.
Ljubljana.
Yeah. And had worked in senior leadership positions in Statistical Office of Slovenia and Statistics New Zealand, as well as in consultancy roles for several international organisations. He's an active participant in the international statistic community and member of Modern Stats Supporting Standards Group. So, yeah, please, Matthias.
Thank you, David, for a nice introduction, and welcome everyone again in Amsterdam. Today probably you still remember my colleague Maret Smekens explained a little bit of context why is Statistics Netherlands so interested in SDMX, and I will provide a little bit more details. But that's still more focusing on the strategy and on the particular strategies how to implement SDMX standard in the organization. So we'll provide some background about the data strategy and data architecture, and then focus on why we chose to focus more on SDMX. And then I have 2 use cases and that have implementation projects behind where SDMX play a large role, and then I will talk about standards and generally and challenges and conclusions. Maybe before I start, on Wednesday there will be another presentation from my colleague Olaf ten Bosch, who will focus more on the role of SDMX with FAIR principles. Just quickly going through the CBS kind of business strategy. So on website we have a multi-annual program which has 3 strategic objectives. So the first one is increased focus in societal challenges such as public health, housing, climate change, etc. And for this we want to provide facts in a kind of very responsive way. So we need increased flexibility to bring this information together. The second strategic objective is increased access to data, which has all to do with findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable data. I will explain a bit later. And the third strategic objective is to maintain high quality, which has a lot to do with not just data quality, but also future-proof IT and processes, as well as data protection. So in terms of the standards, the main driver for introduction of new international standards in organization is data strategy. So data strategy, that is also new, that was approved this year in March by our executive board, has a vision of becoming more data-centric organization. And that means four things. Well, first is the data is decoupled from the processes, applications, and other things where this is kind of locked at the moment. Then there is optimal coordination of data lifecycle, if you like. Again, complying with FAIR principles. That we are in full control of data. That means that we know where data is, what is the quality level, what are the requirements, is it reusable or not, and finally, the ability to connect to external data ecosystems, such as European data spaces and stuff like that. So the data strategy has 10 objectives. They are grouped into the 3 teams. The first team is data mindset. Is data mindset, skills, and governance. Data standards and metadata standards are important for all of this. But what I try to do is to kind of highlight where particularly SDMX has some increased role for us. So in that case, objective to increase data knowledge and skills has kind of 2 aspects in relation to SDMX. One is that we need to learn about SDMX because we have been using so far more or less only for the data reporting. So we need to have, to build the skills in the organization to use SDMX in a broader role. And the second thing is that SDMX can actually help improve the data literacy around organization and also with external users. The second theme is architecture. And here we have actually 3 objectives that are very related to data standards and metadata standards in SDMX. One is that we want to improve the metadata management. Second one is to increase data standardization. And the third one is making data quality more transparent. Finally, we have the group of objectives to improve our data services. So you can kind of map this as an input, throughput, and output. So on the top we have input. So data and metadata standards are important for our input data services, but we are currently not putting so much focus on that. We already had some modernization activities in input area. However, we have 2 projects, important projects, in the other 2 phases, so the throughput and output. So in the throughput, we want to set up what we call CBS data market, which would be environment that would support data sharing and metadata management. And in objective 3, we are improving data dissemination services, mainly our data dissemination database Statline. So these 2 examples I will explain in a little bit more detail in a minute. But first, why the decision to actually use or expand SDMX standard? First is it kind of came in the package. So we decided to select .stat as a replacement for our aging data dissemination solution Statline. And of course, SDMX is underpinning it, as you all know. But then we kind of thought, oh, maybe we can use it even more. So we are currently also considering it use in the internal data standardization. So to kind of not make only the output data fair, but also the internal data more findable, accessible, and reusable. Another important consideration was possibility to cooperation with statistical agencies. So we know that we cannot do everything. It's way too much to modernize, way too much to do. And it's useful to have, communities or networks with our statistical agencies. And finally, we used to have multiple data models that were built internally, and they were not interoperable. So we kind of wanted avoiding having multiple standards as a kind of main information model. So we are now focusing more on SDMX than other standards at the moment, but I will get to that problem a bit later. This important enabler for this data strategy implementation is data architecture. And for data architecture, we adopted so-called 5 steady states architecture. So for some of you, this might look familiar. We used to have approach of 4 conceptual databases. So there is a lot of papers on web that are explaining, input base and micro base and output base, etc. So we extended this. So there are now 5 steady states, and there are some other statistical organizations that are also using national statistical organizations, like Norway, for example. Similar approach, but basically the idea is that you define the states where the data is ready for a certain type of reuse. And we have first steady state is raw data. Then when you standardize the data according to statistical concept and classifications, you get standardized data. After you process the data, so do editing, imputation, stuff like that, you get process data. And after you make estimates and aggregates, you get statistics. And finally, after you protect the data against disclosure risks and prepare them to be published, you get published data. So these are 5 stages, but the steady state is a little bit misleading because in Dutch we call it koppelvlakken, and koppelvlakken means interfaces. So these are not just going to be kind of steady states that you store them somewhere in the database, but actually also the interface between the systems and stuff like that, which in this era of API is quite important now. So very quickly on the current state, so we do have certain central data stores, quite useful ones. So as I mentioned, we just recently in the last 5 years, let's say, modernized the input data. Then we have data service centrum with tens of thousands of data sets, mainly final micro data sets that we also use then for archiving purposes, but also for the micro data research for external researchers, and finally StatLine, which is our output database. But we have a lot of silos, as you might imagine, where then the data is processed and still locked. And you will see that the steady states 2 and steady state 4, they are not very well defined or centralized at the moment. So now let's go to the practical cases. So for the data dissemination case, so the reason was that our system is old and kind of also a bit risky. So we are basically implementing .stat suite, but we are also looking to streamline publication process, improve data literacy, implement better architecture, and improve findability. So there are a lot of other benefits. And the SDMX plays the role of information model as well as open source tools. And part of the business case, if you like, it was the community, the power of community. In terms of the strategy, how to implement it, so there are 3 changes that will happen. So project started, the implementation, the migration started on 1st of October. And idea is to kind of finish most of the work in a year and a half, approximately. So it's quite intensive. So we need to translate data sets from old StatLine format to SDMX. We have figured out how to do it automatically. So we have, it's called there, one-on-one automatic transfer to .stat, which works, but it's not ideal because in our old StatLine, we don't have things like shared dimensions, and probably they are not modeled according to the best practice, and etc. So you could say we will have, StatLine slang as part of the result of this. But yeah, the question is when to do the remodeling, because we cannot remodel all 6,000 cubes in such a short time. So idea is to first do the translation and then remodeling as people have then more time to do it. The second challenge is that our API, which is currently all data API, will become SDMX API. And we have a lot of users for which we don't know who they are because we didn't register them, so they can use it as they want. And we will have so a little bit less than a year of parallel run and a lot of communication on our website and stuff like that. But at some point, which is on this plan end of next year, we will switch off all data, and they will have to move. Yeah, that's that line. Then after this project, our first stage of improving our data and metadata infrastructure with the help of SDMX will be finished. So that's now under architecture, the steady states 5. But we have more plans. So these plans are, how to say, still in the making. CBS Data Marketplace project is up and running, but at the moment we have feasibility and pilots stage, and we also plan to have some role for SDMX in that project. So maybe to the next slide. It is much bigger exercise because it affects kind of multiple steady states internally and touches multiple statistical production systems and stuff like that. So we are currently considering all sorts of aspects like a culture, knowledge, governance, how does this fit in current environment. We have developed different type of communication for different type of stakeholders. So for example, on the left side you have infographics, which has there a cloud. You can't read it, but it says that cloud with the thunderstorm is societal challenges. So it's kind of, we have to do something, otherwise, it will hit us. And on the right side, you have architecture blueprints, which is for complete different type of audience. But as I said, we are still at the beginning, and of course, SDMX is here looked as an information model, but in the context of microdata, which I will get back in a minute. So in terms of the data architecture, the idea is that SDMX would then cover also 3 other steady states, but not with the complete metadata. So there might be some metadata that is not in SDMX, of course. And this should be also staged approach in several phases. But we have a project that is called Data Central. So by the way, in the Netherlands, we are the Central is very, very popular word. So probably you came to the Amsterdam Central, and now you sit in the Park Central. So it's, it's appropriate that we have also a project called Data Central or Data Central. But that project works with other initiatives in statistical divisions that are also modernizing statistical processes. So it's quite complicated. So finally, these use cases cover kind of fair aspects, so dissemination and internal data standardization aspects, but where are use cases how to connect to external data ecosystems, AI, etc. So my opinion, but I think it's already been said today, is that for that SDMX is not enough. It can play a role, but it's not enough. And here I have put on the right side kind of statistical standards or other related standards that are applicable. And on the left side is kind of areas of innovation and standardization versus innovation. If you do it right, you can have a very good, leverage of each other. We believe that SDMX plays a role in that. So for example, it already plays a role in validation, in open data, in data hubs, as we have learned today from other presenters, in knowledge graphs, in explainability of AI or broadly in AI. And they are kind of 2 benefits of that. So first is that SDMX provides certain interoperability, or help with certain interoperability challenges. And the second reason is that it's ISO standard. So when we have to talk to other people who have other standards and other, they don't know about statistics standards, we can come and say, we use this standard that is ISO standard. And if you will, work with us, then you will solve a challenge not just for some organizations, but for the whole statistical community. Okay, only 2 slides more. Challenges. The most difficult thing is the data-centric approach, as we understand it now in the organization, requires cultural change, and that takes time. The second thing is that with the use of SDMX for documenting microdata and managing metadata for microdata, we are a bit of pioneers. So there are not that many organizations that are actually doing that on microdata, and the content guidelines, as they are called, are still being developed for the version 3.0, 3.1? 3.0, yeah. So yeah, that is a bit of a challenge. We have problems with data modeling, not just data modeling with SDMX, but that approach that we are taking of standardization require modeling, and people need to know what modeling is first. I think it was mentioned already today, that problem. And then when you know what is the modeling, then you can do modeling in SDMX easier. I already mentioned, it will take time to implement these things in a staged way. And finally, we have a lot of modernization project, which is on one side helpful because you can start implementing some things in practice in statistical divisions, but on the other side, these projects are competing for the same resources, so it can be difficult. And then conclusions. So our journey in the data strategy is not just about standards, it's not just about SDMX, it's about to have more standardized approach to achieve certain objectives that I mentioned, to create data-centric mindset and improve data literacy. And then something that I heard at some other event is really interesting is, everybody talks about AI, and some people talk about, if you want to have AI, you need to have fair data, but if you want to have fair data, you need to have metadata standards and stuff like that. So another one is we shouldn't underestimate the innovative power international, for example, standard-based community. And I think our first session this morning, AI session, is a kind of indication that there is a lot of innovation potential. And finally, transformation to data-centric organization takes time. You need to have patience and good direction. Thank you. And if there are any questions, of course.
Thank you, Matthias. Okay, so I guess amazingly we have time for a question. Probably just one question, if anybody would like to. Jonathan?
Thank you, Matthias. Very ambitious project, so good luck in that. And I'm happy to...
So that was not ironic, I hope.
Bon courage, as we say in French, but okay. So just taking your experience from New Zealand and Slovenia as well, and now CBS, I'm wondering how you managed to sell XDMX at such a large scale, because many NSOs still consider this as just a reporting burden to international organizations. And what you're doing is quite a revolution, if you like, in CBS, I think. So I'm just wondering how you went about that. What strategies did you apply? And this question of cultural sort of blockers or changing in the organization.
With the benefit of having worked for 3 national statistical organizations, this is my personal view. I think CBS is very large and relatively large and very innovative organization, and comparing to Statistics New Zealand or Statistical Office in Slovenia, culturally in this organization, people kind of knew we cannot do this on our own. We just don't have resources. Like while in CBS, we have a bit more resources and a bit more, ambition sometimes, or innovation capacity. But historically, there was a lot of custom development. So, which was okay, because at the time, for example, where StatLine was invented, there was practically no other options. So that was one of the pioneers of online data dissemination databases. But I think that during all these years, people in CBS started realizing that we cannot at the same time support all this, what used to be very innovative, but then if you don't really, reinvest all the time becomes legacy. So first kind of motivation, if you like, was if we don't invest in something all the time, then we fall behind. And on the other side, we can't invest in everything. So that's one motivation, like how to avoid legacy. And the second motivation is the communities and open source. So CBS is also very, there are a lot of people who really like working communities, really appreciate open source. We also had one of the first offices with a very strong and active R and Python community, and etc. And like a SDMX standard or .stat, they are examples of open source collaboration, which we, I think, or my colleagues also in CBS believe that it is the way how to make things in a effective and efficient way. So I think it's a combination of these two, but I don't know, maybe Maret can add more.
Thank you very much for that interesting presentation. Let's give him a round of applause. So our next two presenters are from HMS Analytics Software. David is leading the SDMX initiative at HMS and is the head of HMS Center for Excellence for Consulting. His background is mathematics, numerical, and data science. He has a passion for frameworks that support finding efficient solutions. And he's been a partner, or he is a partner at HMS, and he joined the company in 2018. Layla has a master's in physics and has been working at HMS Analytics since 2021 as a software developer, working on back-end development, data and analysis tools, development and tool packaging. She's a product manager and currently leading the technical implementation of their SDMX playground.
Thanks, Alan. And thanks to Ellen and David for giving us the opportunity to present here. Very nice to meet all of you. Have a great afternoon, everyone. So Lila and my journey with an SDMX, I just realized only started 5-6 months ago. So many of the things that have been mentioned about SDMX and the challenges one faces when getting into the topic, actually quite fresh. I feel them still here. They make me still a little bit nervous. So what we are going to try today is to share an integrator's perspective, so our perspective on what kind of challenges arise when you try to implement SDMX. As an outsider, we are outsiders here, right? We try to do that for companies. And although we have been supporting the BIS for many years and have been collaborating with Raphael deeply, this is a new path, a new phase for our journey. And so we want to talk, let me quickly figure out how this works. Pretty easy. We want to see how the evolution on the IT side and on the business side requires also the tools to develop further. And HMS is a company that has already been established for 30 years. We have been active in data analytics and building enterprise data architectures for over 30 years. So we bring our own framing, and this is, I think, where it's a good point to start to share a little bit about how we see the world and how integrating with companies works. So we see basically three different areas of interest that need to be combined in order to deliver the outcomes that actually organizations are searching for when they do data or analytics projects. And first, maybe the easiest one is that you have always an enterprise IT. So the question that how can you have a modern IT solution that is compliant with all the regulations that you guys all face and fits into the existing IT landscape? It's a big question. There are lots of tool standards out there, but there's always some legacy, and this is okay. And you need to figure out how to make this all work. The second part, and this is also very important, it's about the business, right, or the business processes. So you have organizations, you need to produce statistics, and from my point of view, a functioning organization would mean that you are excelling in producing those statistics. So it needs to work in order to create those outcomes, and for that you need to have enabled employees that have tools that they can use to effectively contribute. I didn't want to write down and do their job, but actually they need tools in order to do this. And I want to today we want to give you a brief look on how these different areas can be negotiated and how you can find good trade-offs between them maybe. So let's first of all give you an idea on how we see people are collaborating on the, let's call the SDMX data supply chain. Of course, in the beginning and the end, there's a statistician. Someone needs to bring in all the data, someone needs to collect it, feed it into, let's call it the pipeline, and in the end, someone will do the reporting, we create analytics, create insights, do policies, all of that. This is all very important. And of course, the tooling that needs to be done based on the IT infrastructure and some appropriate way how to all deploy that. What I see as central roles are the data governor and the data engineer. And why do I say central? These roles are basically forming how the standard is applied within the company. So the governor is defining the standards, or the SDMX metadata standards, and the data engineer needs to implement it somehow. These roles might not be directly related to actually job functions you have within your organization, but these are roles that can be filled out. So maybe you are a statistician, but you're also a data governor because you're part of a gremium, a group that defines the data standards within your organization. And so you have you set the standard there, right? And those two groups are quite central from our understanding to make SDMX work for the organization in the way it's supposed to do. And today we want to talk about how we see that data governors and data engineers need to work together, collaborate, and what kind of demands they have for their tools, so that they can effectively have effective and simple tools to actually do that. Try to talk a little bit how this can be automized to the highest degree possible, right? You don't want to do things that can be done by machine in a manual way. And of course, also there might be aspects that need to be customizable. So not everything needs to be automated, and some particular business processes require sign-offs, require delays, maybe require check-offs by certain people. So there's need for customization. And in the end, of course, we also need to talk about how this is delivered in an appropriate way and maintained so that it's compliant with IT standards. Now with this setup, I want to hand over to Laila, who's going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of this.
Okay, so like David said, we have the data governor and the data engineer. So what we see is that the data governor needs something like a master metadata registry. So a metadata registry where you can maintain and manage the metadata, and we have a single point of truth. So every metadata you want to have should be contained in the master metadata registry. And then the data engineer needs, of course, a data platform which contains data in a data warehouse and also could contain or will contain metadata, because you need to store the data according to the metadata. And that metadata would be contained in a downstream registry. And like you see here, those tools are kind of separated, which you, at least I think, you don't want this, because you want to have that. You want the metadata artifacts to have to be in a consistent state. So what you would introduce then is some synchronization process, and as we see it here, some synchronization tool comes in place, and we looked at the real-time synchronization. So why wanted we to have the real-time synchronization? So we think both sides, the data governor and the data engineer, can work best together if they have the same metadata they work with. So if something gets updated in the master metadata registry, it should go right away to the downstream platform. And you don't want to do this manually because you want to work seamlessly. So there should be automation, so there needs to be some tooling. And another point is that we chose the one-way synchronization. So this is based on the architecture, because of course we said we wanted to have one master metadata registry. And this is due to the motivation that you would like to reuse metadata. So you want to specify it in a central place, and you want to harmonize the metadata. So the single truth is in the master metadata registry. then how could this work? So like I said, you want to synchronize in a near real time or in a real time sync. So let's just quickly look at one example, which we call the standard case because this is a really simple case. Let's look at it. So what you see here on the left-hand side, that the journey starts, you have a code list, and this code list gets updated and it gets a new entry. So this is like an event. And now the synchronization tool would need to detect the change, then extract the metadata and transfer it. So this is quite simple. So if you have the right tooling in place, this just should work. But what about if you would remove an entry from a code list? So again, we go from the left to the right, you remove something, and then this gets updated from the master registry in the downstream registry. But as we said before, there's not only metadata downstream, but also data. So data could cross-reference to the metadata and would need the code list entry. So there would be an inconsistency which you don't want, of course, because then something could go wrong when disseminating, for example, data. So what you could also place in your processes is not only the tools, which we talked about, but also you could make changes or apply conventions and rules to business processes. So in this special example, you could use SDMX 3.0, which then contains semantic versioning. In case you haven't heard of semantic versioning, I just will wrap it up here. So semantic versioning has 3 numbers. It's a major version, a minor version, and a batch. And depending on the changes you make, you have to update then the versions. In the standard case before, you have a backwards compatible change, so this would be a minor revision. But now here, if you remove something, this is not backwards compatible, obviously, because the data gets broken, you would need to update the version. So if you would use this business process, which should be hopefully easy to monitor and do if you have a central registry, because you only do make changes there, then if you see then now below in the example, you would update and make this automatically, but nothing would get inconsistent because the old version of the metadata, of course, is still there. So it could be that it's not just all about tooling, but also about thinking about standards and conventions in business processes.
Yes, so you might say, okay, this is all very simple. I think our organization is a little bit more complicated. I think we get that. This is a very reduction fuse, but this is also talk, right? We only have 20 minutes time. But the real-time sync might not be an option for everyone. So when might this be the case? So just to mention a couple of things, if there is not sufficient trust in terms of quality, compliance, and also, for example, semantic versioning consistent use of semantic versioning between all the people who are actually functioning as data governors and all the people who are actually working with data as data engineers, then this is probably not a good solution, right? If someone breaks the system, this will not work for you well. If the kind of API contracts that need to be established by those tools are not there or cannot be there, maybe this is hosted, maybe this is even cross-organization, this is also not a good option. Last, I guess with this kind of tight integration, you would always need to quickly follow up. So somehow the process timing and how updates of the SDMX pipeline might go downstream need to be figured out, and dependencies need to be made aware of the people involved there. But of course, there's another option, and we cannot only do real-time sync. Lala, do you want to elaborate on that?
So now let's again go into some details. We then thought about something that we call the configured real-time sync. So why configured? So you want to have some configuration. For example, you want to filter the objects you want to synchronize automatically and in real time. So for example, you only say you want to have specific artifacts. For example, you only want to automate the update of code lists because they change rapidly, so you don't want to do it manually. And normally only entries are added, so there's not so much, there won't occur so much problems. And the other thing is that, of course, in a master metadata registry, you could have lots of metadata, and you don't need maybe all the metadata downstream in the registry because you just have specific data you want to disseminate, or because you just have a specific use case in the data platform. So you also maybe want to identify specific IDs you only want to update. And then, like I said, codeless, for example, you maybe can update automatically, but then maybe you need some approval steps if you want to update data structures or data flows, because they are quite, if they change, then maybe all of the data you have in your data store could be inconsistent and data dissemination could break. So maybe you want to have really an optional approval step for specific metadata types. And then on the other hand, maybe you just say you don't want any real-time sync, which is in that way automated that you don't see which data you update. But maybe you want a batch sync, so you just wait for some changes to come up, and then this is synchronized either scheduled, or you just say you have manually trigger. But of course you then will still have an integration tool, so you just need to push some buttons in the end, and you don't need to download metadata, transfer it manually. So what we looked at, we made a case study and we implemented some real-time sync. So where we started is we wanted to support a lot of the data lifecycle with SDMX. So we chose FMR as a central metadata registry where you can do not only metadata management but also data validation and mapping and that stuff. And then on the other hand, we have the data platform where we chose .stat Suite. And those we connected then with a Kafka instance, which is a streaming platform, if you don't know, and then a self-implemented synchronization tool. And why did we do that? So as we said before, we have those different users around the data lifecycle, and we want them to have a seamless workflow, that they don't even know that there's different tools in place, and they can just work in real time on their projects and their problems. And on top of all those toolings and implementations comes then the enterprise IT. And this includes many, many standards, like you see now on the left-hand side. And I just choose a few of them. So you want to have a secure deployment, and you want to maybe reuse authentication you already have in your company. Then you want to have a reproducible implementation and deployment of tools, which can also be implemented programmatically. So you don't need a person who knows how the setup is done, but it is just stored in code, for example. And then maybe you also want to deploy platform agnostic, that you can be independent from any cloud provider, for example.
Thanks, Leila, for sharing our case study here. So this is just only a vision. We are trying to build that. This is how we could envision this could work, right, in order to bring all those different sides together. And to conclude here, I think what is like we started with, we wanted to talk about evolution, right? We have this triangle, and as soon as one side of the triangle changes, the others need to adapt. This is what evolution is about, right? Everything constantly changes and need to always reevaluate. So the question maybe you can ask yourself is, which side of the triangle might be changing for you? Is it the tools next? Do we need to adopt the business processes? Where do we need to wiggle a little bit in order to make it work again, make it round again? Because all three things need to come together. I would just want to comment also quickly on the set that we have discussed. It was very simple, but I think it applies to very different scenarios. So we took that setup because we wanted to have one tool for one role, but you could also imagine where you have multiple data dissemination platforms. You have one central data registry, and you want to propagate your metadata to those different data dissemination platforms. So this might be a relevant case for you. Also, if you migrate to a new tool from an old tool, there will be always a transition phase, right? You need to figure out how can those tools stand beside each other, and how can I create some space, some time in order to do a structured process for the migration. You don't want to do so I wouldn't do a big bang migration because there's a lot of risk involved, right? The whole production could break down. So this would be kind of a backup solution where you could slowly transfer over. I would be interested to talk to you later how you plan to do that. And of course, this tool allows you to smoothly increase the level of automation you have and try out things that work and figure out where you still want to rely on manual business processes, manual sign-offs, and reviews. I want to end this talk with a question. What do you see are the main challenges between collaborations of data governors and data engineers? Thanks for your attention.
Okay, so we have a few minutes if anyone has some questions. Yes.
No, actually, I don't have a question. I have an answer.
Okay, even the better.
So what do I see as the main challenge in the collaboration of data governance and data engineers? From my experience, it would be that the data governance will strive for the ideal case, for the perfect data model, whereas data engineers will struggle with realities on the ground. But it can go it can go the other way around as well, with data engineers calling for the perfect model. I'm looking at OECD, and data governors maybe having regard for established practices. The problem is, long story short is, the perfect or ideal data model is, one, maybe difficult to achieve, two, different people may have different views on what a perfect data model is, and that could be a challenge in the collaboration between data governors and data engineers. But I also hope that in future versions of SDMX, this will gradually go away. It will be possible. Many of these challenges will be addressed. Thanks.
That sounds very reasonable. Thanks for the answer. And I would like to learn a little bit more about the specifics later, because this trying to get away from an ideal world, but actually realizing that we always need to cope with reality and need to have specific decisions that we actually can implement is quite essential.
If I could just provide a simple comment. You have an indicator, infant mortality rate. And here you have at least 3 dimensions rolled into one. And some people might say that this is not one indicator. You have an indicator mortality. Infant is just an age, and rate is the unit of measure. Whereas the people on the ground, the statisticians who are in it, they will tell you that, what are you talking about? Okay. There is an indicator very well established, infant mortality rate, with its own methodology, with its own metadata, with its own measures. And now you're talking to me that this is just a subclass of the general mortality? No, the data sources are different. Methodology is different. Method of calculation is different. So this is one of those constant causes of issues which we have seen. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Okay, I have a question maybe more to the audience, but your presentation gave me the inspiration for this. So if you could please go back to the slides with Kafka.
Let's see if I can do that.
We have to be quite quick. Yeah.
Okay.
So here, what is happening here? The team is introducing the ability to kind of get the notification somehow from Fusion Metadata Registry and then notify the .test suite in the end that the metadata needs to be updated. The question is, so there is a concept of notifications when particularly in SDMX there is a concept of notification service which gives you the ability to actually subscribe to the events when something is changing within the registry. It has its limitations, so maybe this is just a use case for the evolution of this particular service to address the cases like this, when you really have just the architecture could become simpler so that you directly subscribe to the change and then you reflect the change on the downstream system.
A quick comment. So actually we used the implementation of FMR, which has, like I said, the Kafka integration. So we use the events that are subscribed there, published there, and we subscribed them. And building on that, we updated the metadata. So we actually use this. Something you need maybe to keep in mind is that you need dependencies or something. But most of the time you can just use like the events and it will work. And then you have like the REST API calls to each system, and then you can update programmatically the structure.
So there is synchronization right? So it's
Kafka is for getting the changes. Like you said, we just use the Kafka events to get the changes, to know that there are changes. Yeah, is this?
Okay, thank you. Just so, Edgardo, just a brief last question. Any other questions, please, for the last session, okay?
Very brief. I think you mentioned regarding the triangle that any of the three elements, tools, IT, or business that change, makes the other change. And I fully agree with that. My concern, however, is that I don't think that it's desirable that any of them, except business, change and make the other change. I mean, I know that there might be special situations like an IT tool going end of life or things like this. But for me, the driver of changes should be the business and not the IT area or the tools being used. Can you agree on that or elaborate otherwise if I am wrong?
This would reflect with my experience with in most domains and organizations that mostly the business side tends to change more quickly than the other two sides. But then you can ask, okay, maybe you can adapt your business processes instead of the tools and the IT landscape again, because this is much longer time scale, right? We don't build IT tools with just, I don't know, a couple of months. We don't change our IT landscape within a year. So I'm completely agreeing, and this is a compromise, a negotiation, a discussion, a dialogue that needs to be had. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So another round of applause to the presenters. Okay, so we come to our breakout session. Okay, so here's how it will work and the timings. So Alan, my co-chair, will split the room into 4 groups. Okay, and so 2 groups will go downstairs to the breakout room downstairs. Okay, you can follow me because I'll be going down there. The moderators are myself and Alan and Luca and Edgardo. So thank you very much. So Edgardo is sticking his hand up if you don't know who Edgardo is, and I'm sure you all know who Luca is and Alan. Thank you very much to the moderators. Upstairs we have 2 flip charts, okay? One at the back and one at the front, yeah? And
so it's just challenges. That's I haven't linked them.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and people say
No, I don't want to. I don't need to use the laptop. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for what looks like some very productive discussions on the challenges that you faced implementing SDMX. So I'm going to try to summarize across sort of the groups on the fly. So bear with me. So one of the common themes that I've been seeing, from my group, also over here, the culture, the fear of adoption, general resistance to change, new tool adoption, that this is sort of generally a challenge that you guys have faced when implementing SDMX. And whenever we're doing a change, you always have this sort of challenge. And one of the challenges that we identified also was sort of having support from management, because this can really help in our experiences sort of get beyond this change, is by empowering people, making it part of their objectives. Here we have a challenge of education. Encouraging them to get that education can often be at least facilitated by a push from top management. And one of the challenges that we also identified was, you got a real problem if your top management doesn't understand that SDMX is more than just a format, or sort of what the benefits of SDMX could be. because then they're not putting sort of the resources aside to do this. They're not empowering their staff to get the training that they need. And for our group, at least, what we thought was useful to get top management on board was focusing the messaging sort of like we heard from our AFDB colleagues earlier. It's not about SDMX. It's about improve your dissemination, improve your data, the efficiency of your data validations or your data processing, focusing on sort of that business case and less about SDMX. We thought would be helpful. So what else do we want to talk about here? I also see a few places that we have some data governance questions. Here we have, for example, multiple concept definitions, enumerations. We lump, in our group, we sort of lump that together under sort of complexities of SDMX, but not real complexities, perceived complexities, right? The fact that you need to standardize your enumerations, or that you might want to standardize your enumerations as part of a move to SDMX, isn't necessarily a complexity of SDMX in itself. It's a process of wanting to have improved governance around your system. So what we thought was helpful to get over this perceived complexity of SDMX was, show use cases, show that to the extent possible, if you're an international organization, show how peer countries have done this. Perhaps bring in people from peer countries to talk about the success that they've had, improving their data governance through the use of SDMX. And then there's the sort of real problem that we have, the actual complexity of SDMX, or over here, the SDMX technical knowledge lacking, or on this one, lack of SDMX knowledge and staff. That's obviously always a problem. And what people have had success with, or what we've identified as having success, training, accreditation through the .stat Academy, it's great training. Training that we heard about earlier today through the Asian Development Bank, also great training, right? Making training available. And if you're so fortunate to have buy-in from your top management, putting the requirements to have that training as part of someone's personal objectives that they're sort of their APR is against, and preference for hands-on training so that people are moving beyond just the conceptual, this is a code list and somehow it feeds into a concept scheme and I'm, watching someone do it instead of doing it on a data set that you do yourself. That can also help alleviate some of the perceived complexity of SDMX because you're sort of stripping down just to what is actually SDMX. So I think I've covered many of the sort of common themes I'm seeing, but I'll hand it over maybe first to David. Do you have anything you want to add?
Did you do the points on the...
I think I got most of them.
Yeah, okay, so just in case it wasn't mentioned, so a main challenge also was using SDMX for microdata. Okay, this was mentioned. Was that the only challenge that you missed? Or?
Yeah, I think that's the main one that I think most of them are this one.
Okay, and also it was mentioned that it's not evident how to move between the stages of the life cycle. So often people start with dissemination, but then moving beyond dissemination, if you want to say, okay, we're going to start using SDMX for like production or collection, then how do we actually couple those stages of the life cycle? How do we kind of like marshal the SDMX data amongst along the path? So that's a challenge if you want to do that. So and then maybe how to overcome that. I'm not sure if something. A lot was mentioned about the need for training materials and training resources. So, tools and best practices. So I guess, this could fill that gap, more guidelines, etc. So, is that it, Alan? Okay, so shall we move to Q&A then? Yeah, so that's it for the exercise. Thank you very much for your participation. I think it was quite a rich discussion. It was a real shame we had to kind of end it, because I think a lot of people still wanted to stay there, It was, that was very good. I mean, I ran out of time. It was amazing just how quick it went. So now if we could move into like the final Q&A discussion, because we had hardly any time, to field the questions. So could I ask, and I'm sorry to spring this on you, the presenters, please could you move down the front? We'll get some chairs so everybody can sit. And then, we can have the Q&A until we can go for about another kind of 15-20 minutes. I think that's a scheduled time. Okay, so yeah, please, presenters down the front. Have we got everybody?
Thinking. Fun.
Oh yeah, Juan, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so I think we're all in place now. So so please, as I said, we didn't really have time for many questions from the audience. So if anybody would like to ask a question to our distinguished presenters, then please go ahead. Luca, were you sticking your hand up for a question? Or? All right. Or just to open your bottle of water? I'm not sure.
Yeah, actually several questions, so I'll just ask them all together. I think in Juan's presentation, you mentioned microdata as a challenge, and I was wondering if you were referring to the situation in 2.1 or in 3.0. Like, do you feel that 3.0 solves the microdata issues, and if not, why not? Then, aspetta, poi... I have a question to Matthias. Similar in nature. I mean, you also mentioned microdata as a challenge, I guess especially for the earlier steady states that you mentioned. But my question is, do you see any other limitations in the standard that may make it difficult to onboard also the other steady states that don't have microdata? Or do you think that for the other steady states that don't concern microdata, the standard is complete or okay? I mean, do you see any other missing features in the standard besides the microdata that you mentioned? Then to our two HMS colleagues, I had a question regarding, it's actually a follow-up to what Abdullah was saying, because you were saying, the difference between the engineer and the governor, was that the word? Yeah. And I think you were looking at it from the way of the point of view that each one has their own tool, right? So more tool-centric maybe approach. And Abdullah was rightly saying, well, actually the way we model data, we conceptualize data is actually different. So one thing that would be extremely useful for me as a data governor, if I have a structure that I'm updating according to my conceptual model, I can create also a structure that corresponds more to the data engineer or the way that they conceptualize the data. And I can create a mapping between the two. And to be honest, the reason I don't create these mappings right now is because they're very difficult to maintain. Like, I make a change in one and then I have to make the changes in all the mappings. So in your Kafka approach of having like real-time synchronization, I wonder if there could be some like automated change, like I make a change in the source structure, and somehow, let's say, the mappings that I made are also kind of automatically updated, because that would allow me as a data governor to kind of keep the two views, my more conceptually pure view maybe, and the view that the data engineer likes more, updated more easily. So that's a different kind of sync or automated mechanism that I was thinking about as being useful. So I guess that's a question. That's it.
So please, to the presenters to answer the questions. I don't know.
So I guess we'll answer the questions in the other order. Then, so I think what is due is that you, on the one hand, you can, I think you can comment on this, Laila. You can automate a part of it. On the other hand, it seems like a discussion to be had, right? If you have an idea about how you want data to look like, but someone actually that was working with the data says, this is not working for me. This is a dialogue that has to be had between two humans, and this cannot be resolved by any tool. So I guess as long as you are aware of this, and the limitations that can be done on a technical side, yeah, Laila can comment a little bit on what might be possible in terms of automation.
So you said you need to maintain it right now. You would need to know how you would need to map the data models. So
I can do the mapping. I can make the map. It's just that every time I update one,
yeah, you need to.
I need to update all the
Yeah.
mappings, and I don't feel like it.
So there are some technical possibilities which are like smart mapping, where you could have some rules in place. So maybe that could work. But like, also, you really would need to know the requirements to say this is technically possible. But there are some kind of mapping tools, so you can implement them, which are like smart mappings. So you have like more general rules. You don't need to specify every word and every change. So yeah, you would need to talk. We would need to talk more about that.
Thank you. So the question regarding the challenges with microdata, I don't think that we are at the stage yet to really understand how much the core standard, how to say, whether there is a gap in core standard or not. But what I would say is that just because traditionally SDMX wasn't used that much in the national statistical organizations for documenting microdata, there is, how to say, less probably functionality in the tools that are available. So one example would be that, like comparing to the DDI tools, that like in DDI community, you have tools that can generate quality declarations for microdata in SIMS format. And in SDMX, even though that SIMS is very close to SDMX, probably you don't have, how to say, so developed tools yet, but that can be improved, of course. That's one thing. And the second thing that I would say is that also traditionally there was more focus on, because you can't just rely on one standard, like we also discussed earlier. There is more focus probably to kind of generate or map to SDMX, because SDMX is often, at least for the perspective of national statistical organizations, at the end of the process. And if we want to use SDMX at the, as a more core standard for microdata as well, we would need to be able to map or generate, the also other standards, like for example in the data research community, the DDI is quite popular. So if we want to generate DDI, that would also need to be considered from SDMX. So this kind of functionality I think will be needed, and it needs time to get to that point.
Well, let's clarify this. Microdata, from a National Statistics Office point of view, is raw data. Is the data that you are collecting from each of the information units. When you have that, you don't have indicators at the beginning. SDMX model can recognize these indicators, but the individual raw data is not inside the model. And for provenance, for traceability reasons, you need to have the provenance of how you have built these indicators. So recognizing each of the bases, each of the rows that you have to conform an indicator is part of the things that an NSO needs to worry about. And this is not solved. Maybe it's because it's beyond the scope that we already have on SDMX. But to have full support on the whole statistical process, you need to think about that.
Basically, it's kind of aggregation operation, because you can represent the microdata structure if you want. You can represent the aggregate data, but the link between them or how you get from one to the other is
by now, it's not so practical.
Yeah,
It's not practical to identify this raw data. And if you have a code list, when you have the code data, you need to say many units will go to some code list that will categorize the information. But at the beginning, it's not codified yet. But you will need to see, okay, all these cases fall in this category.
Like the age falls into an age range. And
Right. So these kind of difficulties must be taken if you really want to follow the whole process on an statistical office. Maybe it's different for an international organization which perceives microdata as each of the indicators that are reported by each of organization, but it's not the same way to conceive the microdata.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, like, people from the floor have a chance to. Well, another person, sorry, from the floor has a chance to ask a question. So please, if anybody would like to, please, Rafael.
I have a question to Stefan and Tom. We quite often hear in the context of you need to provide better education to think about a certification, an SDMX certification. And I think you did a little bit something like this when I hear you for the Asian colleagues. Yeah. If we, let's say, would set up such a program, how would you do that? Yeah. What are the things we need to think about? Because I think also for the other ISO standard you were actually talking about, I think you also have these certification programs there, yeah?
17025, it's the accreditation under ISO.
Exactly, yeah. So maybe, can you just share a little bit your thoughts, what we would need to think?
Hi, yeah. Microphone. ISO 17025 basically is an accreditation program under ISO that says if you're smart within your domain and you can prove it to us, it takes about 14 months of knowledge base, creating the test, testing the test, getting all that stuff. They come in, they check you out. Once they check you out, they give you a stamp and you're good. Then you can go out and teach the students. And what we were talking about earlier is the accreditation of somebody SDMX, being a data modeler and also being able to implement the system. I use the example of Cisco. There's a thing called CCNA. Cisco Certified Network Administrator. They started that certification program in the early, maybe it was late 80s. Boom, internet was taking off, but that accreditation helped solidify that there was people there to actually do the work, and SDMX doesn't have that right now. There's nobody accredited to say, hey, can I pick up the phone and a SWAT team of SDMX guys will come in? That doesn't happen. Did that answer your question?
Okay, thank you. So, Raphael. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Raphael. When we developed the e-learning courses, we also thought, how can we have an incentive for the participants to take the course? So we said it's important that they receive a certificate, which they can then also present in their office so that they have gained knowledge. So this is why we said we need to have a test for all the learners who have taken the courses. So when we have the models in the courses, we always have some sub-models. And after each sub-model, we will ask some questions to the learners. So based on their feedback, so they can also retake these questions, we have a final assessment at the end, and then we get a score, and they need to achieve at least 70% to be certified. For the tools courses, we have even asked the learners, once we introduce a tool, at the end to complete an exercise. But we have seen in the initial run that this also imposed challenges for many learners, because we always look at how the learners proceed during the learning exercise, and we have seen that there was a high dropout when we had the first exercises for them to complete. So maybe in an e-learning course, and especially if they have to install the tool on their own device, some learners have struggled. But at the end, this was then the benchmark for achieving the certificate. I hope this answers.
Okay, thank you. I don't know who was first. Yeah, okay, Jonathan.
Well, I have the mic.
The microphone.
I just wanted to pick up on, Tom, what you were saying, about, they could be experts in their field, but maybe not experts at delivering e-learning or training. So how do you factor that into that sort of accreditation as well?
A microphone.
Hi. There's a secondary market for organizations that provide the accreditation, that provide the testing. To give you an example, like with Cisco, there are testing centers across the globe that you can walk into, take the test, you get your certification that afternoon. It goes for a lot of other things, but there's well-baked resources to facilitate.
Yeah, I think it's like the Microsoft program as well. No, I did that like years ago.
Cisco does it. There's the one I came encounter with is the telephone union. That was the first one that really kind of got the accreditation going. The linesmen needed to have some sort of an accreditation, so that's kind of how it came about.
Okay.
At least under ISO.
Okay, thanks. So I think Abdullah, you were next.
Yeah, thank you. Abdullah Ghazalov, UN Statistics Division. My question is for Matthias, but actually I'd like, if the other speakers would want to contribute to it, it would be welcome, I think. So based on your experience at those 3 national statistical offices, and if you look at GSBPM, if you look at the statistical value chain, which of the functions a national statistical office should outsource, which ones it can outsource, and which one it can never outsource, and which tasks with regard to data processing should remain a core competency of a statistical office that should never be outsourced?
Just a clarification. Do you mean in the context of SDMX adoption, or do you just mean generally?
Is there a difference? Well, seriously, we know that SDMX started with reporting, but we also know that the business case tends to cover more and more of the statistical value chain. So it's a general question in the context of SDMX, but also outside. Which of these tasks, moving the data along the statistical value chain, which ones can be outsourced and which ones should never be outsourced? That's my question.
Yeah, thanks. Just to say, I think this has to be our last question as well, because we're out of time, but please, answers.
Yeah, at least to how I see it, and I've been exposed to different, statistical systems, if you like. In New Zealand, you have you don't have register-based system. On the other side, in the Netherlands, we have highly register-based systems. So there are some differences in statistical systems around the globe, and then there are also some differences in terms of the role of national statistical organization, like, I don't know, in the Netherlands, CBS practically produces all statistics, while in some other countries, ministries are producing statistics, etc. So the question, I don't think is that simple that you can say what GSBPM functions you can outsource. I could say you could outsource data collection, for example. There in some statistical offices there were discussions about, or maybe they even did it. But on the other side, you would have the opposite. I think it was Statistics Sweden who is doing data collection for other government departments for non-statistical purposes. It is really depending on the kind of, how things are organized in the country. But I think that the core part really, where the independence of National Statistical Organization matters, is to provide key statistics. Maybe you can collect them via certain third parties, but you should be able to show how they were collected, or that it's transparent methods and processes. So this transparency and independence are, I think, the main reason that we can't outsource more as national statistical providers.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to respond as just the last word?
So from my perspective, as someone working for a service provider, I would be very doubtful to outsource anything that is essentially contributing to your core product. So anything that would rely on, I want to produce those statistics, someone in your organization needs to understand this from beginning to end. You can outsource the data engineering part, you can outsource the IT part, say, please build a platform for me, but someone needs to actually understand it from your organization, that it produces how to take those surveys, put it into a data table, and then say, okay, we need to do the KPIs in this way. And as long as you're probably able to describe that, and then you hand this over to someone else, totally fine. But this person needs to be in your organization, from my point of view.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Because it's the core of the competence of a statistical office.
Okay. Okay, so I think we'll have to close there. So thanks a lot to everyone. Thanks a lot to the presenters. So a round of applause, please, for coming up again.
And just one small organizational announcement. Contrary to what I said this morning, now we have the welcome cocktail. That remains true. But it's not going to take place at the bar. It's going to take place downstairs, where we also have the coffee and the lunch. So for the welcome cocktail offered by the BIS, you can go downstairs starting from now. All right.